department.
This has just started.
Okay. And she has so much to her than just what she does and what she has done in the years that have gone by. So I'm sorry I'm missing it this morning, but I most certainly will listen to the recording because I think she's led a very interesting life. So I'm going to hand over to Margot. Enjoy her and look after her, please. And I will see you all soon.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Sure.
It's a real privilege to have this opportunity to talk to everyone. So welcome. This behind me is the HBH gym. What I thought I'd do this morning is talk to you a bit about my career, because it gives a focus as to what I bring to my work with Howick Baptist. Most people, when they think of physiotherapy, think of getting sore necks and backs treated and maybe even massage. But I've chosen and been fortunate enough to specialise in a very unique field of physiotherapy, which is working with people with neurological conditions and also specialising in the care of the elderly. So when I first started as a young physio many years ago, and I started working at Auckland Hospital, and my first placement was in the neurological ward. It was really fascinating because I worked with people with very unusual neurological conditions, and also people with Parkinson's, motor neurone disease, all sorts of things. I was there for 6 months, and then on the same floor at Auckland Hospital, it was level 6 at that time, was the neurosurgical ward. And for some bizarre reason unbeknown to me, they put a very new physio graduate in charge of rehabilitation in the neurosurgical ward. And as you can imagine, it was very challenging rehab. There were mainly 2 groups of people. There were people who'd had neurosurgery for tumours, and then people who'd had brain damage because of accidents. So thinking about what I did back there brought back to mind one of my first challenging clients, a man called Steve. He was a young man who was 6'3" tall, and he'd come off his motorbike in an accident, and he couldn't move or do anything. He had the most wonderful mother who religiously visited him all day, every day. And back in those days, the treatment for people with damaged neurological systems was to put them through the developmental sequence. So it's the sequence that babies went through of learning to roll over and crawl and pull to stand. So every day I'd ring up an orderly and he'd come up, and the 2 of us would lift Steve down to a gym mat on the floor. There was no such thing as high-low beds in that day. And I would try every technique in the book to try and get some movement out of Steve. Now, bear in mind, he was a 6'3" bikie. There are different techniques you can use to facilitate movement, like you can pick up a leg and turn it to sort of facilitate rolling, or you can pull on the arm and facilitate rolling. Absolutely nothing worked. And after about 3 weeks of this, I went home and said to my husband, who was having a beer and relaxing, absolutely cannot help Steve in any way. And then I had a brainwave, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a bottle of beer in. Now, you wouldn't dare do that these days, but anyway, I got a bottle of beer from my husband, took it in, placed it at the side of the mat. I've never seen anyone move so quickly. And it taught me a very valuable lesson early in my career, that at least 50% of what therapists and people achieve is through walking alongside your patient, getting to know them, encouraging them in whatever way appeals to them. So I also had another patient that I remember then called Denise. She was a young girl who'd been riding on the back of her boyfriend's motorbike, and they'd been in a crash. The boyfriend subsequently disappeared, but Denise was left in hospital with a very bad physical condition of ataxia. So with neurological conditions, you can either have increased tone, where you can move in one direction easily, but not in another direction. You can have decreased tone, where your limbs are floppy, or you can have a thing called ataxia, where if we go to straighten our arm, the muscles on the back of our arm are working to extend it, but the muscles on the front have to relax to allow it to do it. In ataxia, the timing between the groups of muscles is out. So Denise had ataxia. If you did a finger nose test, she would overshoot. She had movement, but it wasn't accurate. She too had the most wonderful parents who were there day in, day out. And there's a few different techniques that you can use to help with ataxia. And I was really busy at that stage on the neurological ward. Although I saw people twice a day, I couldn't be with them all day. And so I taught the parents what to do with Denise. And they were religious at doing these exercises. About 4 or 5 years later, we were getting renovations done at home, and our builder employed another chippy. And the chippy turned out to be Denise's father. And he said to me, "Margot, I'm so pleased we've found you." And I looked a bit startled, and he said, "Do you know Denise is now married with 2 children?" So from a girl who couldn't walk because she had wobbles in all different planes of her body, through to the love of her parents, determination of her parents, and determination of herself, she's gone on to have a very fulfilling life. And that taught me another lesson about the amazing role that family and friends play in people's recovery. After the neurosurgical ward, I was seconded to the costly unit at Auckland Hospital, which was a geriatric unit with 2 very large inpatient wards and an outpatient day ward. And after a very short time, I was put in charge of this department. And that's informed my practice for a lot of what I do here at Howick Baptist. I was lucky enough to do some research there, and I was there for 4 years, after which I was headhunted to go and run a place called the Sutherland Unit, which was for people under 65 who needed rehabilitation. And I had 4 aides there, and it was a really challenging placement because one of the aides was very religious. And not only would she read the Bible to residents having their physiotherapy, but she would also sing a lot of hymns. So that was a lot of fun, that placement. I had a couple of children and in that time, and eventually went to work part-time and ended up leaving Sutherland Unit, although I loved it there, and did part-time work at the Little Sisters of the Poor, who had a small geriatric unit attached. And I learned a lot there too. Across the road from me, there lived a lady who was a speech therapist. And she said to me, "Margot, there's a job going where I work at Mount Roskill Grammar School. Why don't you apply? You get all the holidays off and paid." So to a mother, that was irresistible opportunity. And so I went to work at Mount Roskill Grammar with people who are the most bravest of the brave. Children with physical disabilities like muscular dystrophy or cerebral palsy and their families. And it was a very humbling time. And I stayed there for a very long time. And we integrated these children into the life of the school in general. While I was there, a friend's mother had a stroke, and it was coming up to Christmas, and she was in a rest home or private hospital really, and the physio had gone on holiday. And my friend said, "Margot, can you help Mum?" So naturally I did, and that led to the rest home saying, "Could you please come and work with us?" And I said, "Well, I'm really busy at the school." And they said, "You can do whatever hours you want, whenever you want." And so I ended up working at Powley Hospital at Blockhouse Bay. And that was more experience with the elderly. And I also had a sideline in disseminating medical equipment, mainly wheelchairs and walking frames, that was going to be biffed. And I used to send it to places overseas that needed equipment, like Nepal was one place, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands. One day I was at work at Powley, and one of the aides came up to me and said, Margot, can you get me a wheelchair for Uncle? And I said, look, what's wrong with Uncle? He's had a stroke. And I said, look, I'm sure he can get a wheelchair through the hospital system. No, they said. I was so busy. I thought, oh, look, I'll just give her a wheelchair for Uncle. I thought no more of it. 6 months later, that another relative of Uncle came up to me at the Christmas party and said, Margot, we were so grateful for that wheelchair. Uncle hadn't left the house for 6 months. I said, what? She came up close to me and whispered, overstayer. It turned out that a nephew had been sent out from Samoa to try and help Uncle with his stroke, and he couldn't find out what to do. I felt so ashamed that I hadn't taken the time to ask more about Uncle's situation 6 months previously, that I went on the internet to see what information was available for families of people who'd had strokes, and there wasn't much at all. And so I resolved to try and write a book for the families of people that had had strokes, as well as the person with the stroke, because I had learned what a great input families can have to the recovery of people who have neurological damage. So I contacted my tutors from the physio school, one who was 83 and one was 73, and we met for a year to discuss what we were going to put in the book. I hired an illustrator to illustrate and do diagrams, and I hired a graphic designer. And the end result was this book. Oh, where is it? Exercise After Stroke. I wanted to make it free to anyone who needed it, and so the Stroke Foundation have very kindly put it on their website. And it's a fantastic resource for families. It goes through everything from how to roll over, how to stand up, how to walk, how to get in and out of a car, and it's been very widely used. It was a huge challenge to make because I had to get everything critiqued by other experts, other physiotherapists, by doctors, by specialists, and also by the people who'd had strokes themselves. So one day when I was in the middle of doing this, and it took several years to pull it all together, I was driving home and turning into my driveway, and I noticed an upturned canvas on the footpath opposite. And I thought, oh, that's strange. Maybe someone's thrown it out. Maybe my husband could use canvas to paint on because he's an artist. So I went up and I turned the painting over, and there it is on the wall behind me. I thought, that's a fantastic painting. I better go and knock at the door of the house. Maybe they put it out to be collected and the wind's too strong. Better go and knock at the door of the house and tell the people that it's blown over. We knocked at the door and a lady came out and she said, oh no, she said, I put that out there for the universe and you're the universe, it's yours. We got chatting and I started telling her about the stroke book. I was getting an illustrator to illustrate, and she said, that's really interesting. My husband's had a stroke. Would you like to meet him? Come in. They were very young. They were in their 40s. And it turned out to be the start of a remarkable friendship because they insisted on trying out every single exercise in the book so that the instructions were clear enough for someone at home to follow. It was fantastic. Another person that I got to critique the book was a specialist who was the brother of a friend of mine, and he worked in Christchurch. And he said, this book is fantastic. I hear you're going to Rarotonga on holiday. I'm going to arrange for you to talk to the Minister of Health there because it would be very useful to be used in the islands. So, I said, oh, right. And subsequently, my daughter and I went to Rarotonga. We met with the Minister of Health. And when she heard that my daughter worked for the Starship and was their marketing manager at fundraising, she said, oh, we're trying to raise funds for the hospital at Aitutaki. And I said to her, how much are you wanting to raise? And she looked to one side and she said, $1 million. And I thought, oh. And later I said to my daughter, there's no way we're raising $1 million for a hospital in Aitutaki. But I said, what we can do is ask them what the equipment they need and get it for them. And so that led to another amazing project of sourcing equipment for the hospital in Aitutaki. And they sent this incredible list of equipment. They wanted gym equipment. They wanted an aisle wheelchair for the plane, all sorts of things, hospital beds. And it was such fun trying to fulfill that list. And everything just seemed to fall into place. I approached Kubro and they said, we've got 26 stainless steel nurses trolleys. Would you like some? And I thought, great, I'm sure we could use some of those. And I emailed the people in Aitutaki and said, how many would you like? Oh, we'll take them all, they said. I said, are you sure? 26 stainless steel nurses trolleys? You're only a small hospital. And they said, but we're a 26-bed hospital. And those nurses trolleys would be fabulous because they won't rust and we can use them as bedside trolleys. So my daughter and I worked our way through this list of equipment. And the thing that really stymied us was this aisle wheelchair for an aeroplane. I said, how are we going to get this? And I tried ringing Air New Zealand, couldn't get anywhere. At the time, my daughter had persuaded me to volunteer for an organisation called Eat My Lunch, which provides free lunches to children in schools. And we'd start work at something like 6 o'clock in the morning making these sandwiches, and different groups would come in and assist. And so I'd be in charge or working on a table, and we'd have to show the volunteers what to do. And I'd always choose a man because we had to lift these very heavy boxes of apples, etc. Anyway, long story short, this day there was only a very sort of dopey looking man. No, I shouldn't say dopey looking man, but he was a laid back man, is a better way to describe him. He was on our group. The ladies in the group were saying, how are you getting on with the equipment, Margot? And I said, well, I'm stuck. I've got to get this special wheelchair for an aeroplane. And the man spoke up and he said, I know Shelley at Air New Zealand. I'll give you her phone number. Well, it turned out that this man was the head of a very important tourism company, and he was always liaising with Air New Zealand. And Shelley from Air New Zealand came up with the aisle wheelchair. So that was a huge adventure for me, and I really enjoyed it. So I was semi-retired and I was getting bored, and I saw the job advertised at Howick Baptist. It had been, the physiotherapy department had been run by a wonderful woman who ran a very tight ship, and my kids were laughing. My cousin was laughing. He was saying, you're far too old for another job. No one will want you. Anyway, to their credit, I'm very grateful that Howick Baptist employed me, because it's led to a whole new area of improving people's quality of life. And it's been a wonderful time here at Howick Baptist. My children, incidentally, think it's hilarious that I'm running a gym, because they say, you're overweight, Mum, you're not fit, you're old. And I simply say, I'm the right person for the job because I'm non-threatening. And we run a fantastic department and we're really busy. And we've been able to introduce some really interesting initiatives. One of the most thrilling has been a machine called EnableX, and it's a way of allowing people with stroke arms, particularly, to get movement out of their arm by moving a device which connects them with games on the internet. I have it here. And when we first started with it, we thought we'd run a trial with the residents, and we thought we'd try with the most disabled residents, not the most able residents. And so we had a really nice lady who was in it's called a comfort chair, a sling type chair, because she had terrible back pain and she couldn't sit up straight. The only thing she could do was sit underneath the arm pulleys lying on her back and use the pulleys. And I thought, we're going to see if Margaret can use it. And so I was fortunate enough to get a volunteer who came in every day and practiced with Margaret. There she is lying in her comfort chair. Gradually, little by little, this device encouraged Margaret to sit up straight. And I said to her, Margaret, if you can sit up straight for an hour, we would be able to put you in a wheelchair and take you out, and you can go wherever you like. I said, where would you like to go? She said, I'd love to go to Smith & Coe's. And I was thinking she'd want to buy new clothes, but her goal was to get to the makeup counter at Smith & Coe's. So thanks to this device, no fantastic physio from me, she was encouraged to break through her pain barrier and sit up in a wheelchair for longer and longer. And here she is sitting in her wheelchair. Once she could sit in the wheelchair, I suddenly thought, I think you could drive a power chair. And you know what? She did. She's sicker now and out of the wheelchair, but she was given about 2 years of freedom to drive herself round Howick Baptist rather than relying on other people to push her. We also have a lot of interaction with people that come to the gym, and we will try to do a bit of speech therapy with people that need it, because it's really hard to get a speech therapist here. And so we use things like communication box and phrase completion things. And one day a lady came, and I was explaining to her sister that we'd try and do a bit of speech therapy work with her. And the sister said, you're not going to believe it, Margot, but I used to be a speech therapist. And so this lady, who's with us today on the Zoom, I'm very pleased to see, kindly did a protocol for us to help people make conversation. So what else do we do in the gym? We're lucky enough to have the gym equipment. You can see the treadmill here. We have a exercycle, and we've been able to get all sorts of people up on the gym equipment. Here you can see our lovely man using the EnableX and also on the exercycle. Can you see that clearly? That was a thrilling episode. Here's another man on the exercycle.
It's funny.
And a lady on the rowing machine.
That have been saying to me,
sorry, I'm not quite sure how to operate the Zoom here. I'll just finish and then I'll open up for questions. The most exciting thing I've been involved in is having people here as volunteers. Now, one of the residents' partners, wife, said, I'd love to be a volunteer for you. And when her partner passed away, she started coming and working on Monday mornings with us. It's Christine Cook. Howick Baptist runs by the Eden philosophy, where this is the residents' home, and they're involved as much as possible in the running of Howick Baptist. And a lot of the people work as volunteers in the home. And I thought that'll never work in physio. We could never have a volunteer. But we actually got so busy, I thought I desperately need volunteers. And I did end up co-opting 2 people who are residents here to be volunteers. One lady's 93 and she runs a gym group with people from the rest home who come down here and use the gym equipment. We're here, but we don't have to do anything because Gwyn supervises extremely well. The other man is a lovely man called Gordon, and he comes every morning religiously and works alongside our residents, encouraging them. Do your exercise like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Try this. 2, 3, 4. He is the most invaluable member of our team. And recently, I had another resident elder from Howick Baptist say to me, Margot, I'd like to be a volunteer here too. Now, this man is a lovely man. He can't walk without a walking frame and someone with him, and he can't talk. He has a tremendous stutter. And I think that was the most moving moment I've ever had in my career, that he felt confident enough in his welcome and confident enough that he could add something to the residents here, that he wanted to be a volunteer. And so he's our 3rd volunteer. And it showed me that this department here, this gym, is far more than a gym. It's a centre for friendship. And I'm so very grateful that I work here and that I have the freedom to be creative in my job. So it's been a rather long story. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? Any comments anyone would like to make?
Yes, please. How wonderful you are touching the life of others from your experience. And I have one question, please. How much it differed to have a therapy for those who have a stroke or any other how can I say, is it disability, to have the therapy before under 65 years of age or over, which is more difficult?
Look, I have found that there's a lot of ageism present in the hospital system. We get a lot of people that come here who've been, well, not a lot, a couple a year, who have been deemed not suitable for rehab. And it's because they've had a severe stroke and also have dementia usually. So everyone that's admitted to the hospital, I assess, and then they join the program regardless of their age. When I trained, it was felt that you had an injury to the brain and nothing could be done, like a head injury. But now science has shown that the brain is very plastic and can recover at any age. There's a limit to what we can achieve. We can't often with people achieve a great deal, but even if we can help them to pinch their fingers together so that they can pull a rug up on them, we've improved their quality of life. So age is no barrier to rehabilitation.
Okay. Thank you.
Has that answered your question?
Yes, thank you.
I would like to just
Any other
ask
questions?
a comment. I think that what you've been telling us is just so fascinating and so interesting, and I think, you know, what a wonderful, very impressed with your work that you've done. When you said about the brain, I worked with a chap. He had been in the military and had been affected by a land bomb, and he could hardly talk when he came to us. But we had an emergency earthquake. Well, it was an earthquake in Wellington. And so he just turned into his old self. He was a sergeant, and he was organising all the other students in our group. It was absolutely marvellous. He just sort of fell into place. Yeah, he didn't stay that way, but his brain just clicked in, switched into emergency mode, and he was marvellous.
I'm afraid I can't hear you, Chris. We seem to be having a bit of internet problem.
Oh,
Yeah, no, it was
I
clear.
can hear you now.
Yeah, it was clear that speaking. No, what we did was we temporarily unmuted on the space bar, but I've now unmuted the microphone anyway.